Welcome in, Draft Nicks, to another edition of Real Baseball Talk here on Draft Nation. DraftNation.com is the spot to go as the hot stove really starts to heat up in Major League Baseball now that the first big domino has fallen. Absolutely everything you need to find out about your favorite teams. Yankees certainly busy, even if they didn't win that first big domino piece falling. The other team across town from them, the Pirates, will they be busy or not for the Pittsburgh fans in our listening audience? We'll get into all of it and look ahead to the offseason and what else is going to happen this winter. As usual on Real Baseball Talk, I'm joined by Claudio Reilsono and John Perrotto here to talk about absolutely everything that's happened so far and all that's left yet to come. And it's perfect timing, really, because John is fresh back from the winter meetings down in Texas, where a lot of this business was first announced or became official, or maybe in some cases stuff started to get worked on that will become more official and get announced over the next few weeks and months. John, I know there's a bunch of different storylines that get circulated around this time, around the winter meetings, but let's start, like I said, with the first big domino to fall, and Juan Soto going across town to the Mets, leaving the Yankees. Yankees fans are forever and a day going to believe that this was about one simple thing. It was money. Soto left to get more money from Steve Cohen and the Mets. I couldn't blame him if that's what the decision was about. Is that really what it came down to here? Why did Juan Soto choose to leave the Yankees for the Mets?
It was the money. I think what it came down to, I mean, the difference was 1 year. The Mets offered 15 years and 765. The Yankees offered 16 and 760. And Soto was determined from the beginning when he turned down his contract offer 2 years ago from the Nationals for $440 million over 15 years. And that proved to be a prudent decision. He made $325 more million by waiting it out and going to free agency. But he wanted to set the market for every other player, and he wanted to go where he had the most money. And the Mets also offered him a free suite for every game, 4 free premium tickets for every game, which is something the Yankees wouldn't do. And, the whole time everyone thought that the Mets would go as high as they had to go to get Soto. And it was just a matter of Soto wanted to go to the highest bidder, and he did.
Is this the best move, you think, Claudio, for a player like Soto? Is this going to work out for him both short-term and long-term?
I thought the better move would have been to stay with the Yankees because when you're talking that, and I'm all for everybody making as much as they possibly can, but when you're talking $700 million and so on and so forth, as opposed to $600 million, whatever the Yankees offered, but again, I think John was right about the suite. Maybe he felt offended, or maybe he didn't feel like part of the family, God knows what. But I thought he was going to stay with the Yankees, to be honest with you. But, when John said those numbers, remember years ago, I know both of you do, especially John, when Dave Parker was made $1 million a year. Mm-hmm. Now, $1 million was wow. But now, 15, 16, 35, 45, 50 million a year, it's like, that's mind-boggling, but I think the contract that long, I think it's crazy because there's no, I don't know, again, maybe you guys, especially John, might remember a player getting paid that much for that long of a time, that the last, I don't know, 5, 6 years, 4 years of the contract, he was worth it. I mean, a guy like Pujols, he faded. I'm trying, Cano, Alex Rodriguez, his thing. I don't know if there was a contract of that length that the last 4 or 5 years was a good deal.
And to be quite honest, that is baseball growing at the same rate that, for example, the NFL or NBA are growing, to where that value, that yearly value, is going to be dwarfed by, whatever comes along in the next 15 years, or, not still be paying a player more than they might be generating on the field? I think that's an interesting question. But then also, John, I think there's the question of what next now for the Yankees. Like, they signed Max Fried. Okay, that was clearly Brian Cashman's pivot move, right? He said, and he was very open in saying, well, I couldn't do anything until we figured out Soto. They figured out Soto was not going to stay. And then he was able to go in on Max Fried, and we'll see where it goes from here. There are some other big names out there that they've already been attached to, maybe some of their own names that they want to keep in-house. Let's start with the Yankees, and then we'll kind of fan out from there and some of the other big names. What's next in New York?
Okay. For that, I'd like to backtrack for a second, if I could, about the length of these contracts. A lot of it is for competitive balance luxury tax purposes. That way they spread the money out over more years. And the teams know they're paying more for what the production on the front end than they are the back end. But like you said, they never work out that long. But a lot of the reason these contracts keep getting longer and longer is because of the luxury tax. They can spread the salaries out more and not be charged as much each year for the payroll.
Let me ask you another question that I just thought of, John. We all know one of the big pieces of the Ohtani deal in LA a year ago was the amount of deferred compensation.
Yeah.
Do you know if that was a part of the conversation between Boris and Soto and Cohen and the Mets?
No. Soto made it clear to everybody that he didn't want deferred money. He wanted everything up front. In fact, one of the kind of lost in the whole thing is the $75 million signing bonus, which was easily the biggest signing bonus in the history of baseball. So you get $75 million right up front as soon as the contract, officially is approved by Major League Baseball, which is any day. It probably already has by now, actually. So, that was part of it, too. But to go back to the Yankees, and they can spread that over the life of the contract for salary purposes, cap purposes. So they don't have a cap, but a luxury tax, I should say.
Right.
So basically that would be $5 million a year over 15 years as far as for accounting purposes. So that reduces their payroll somewhat when it comes to having to pay the luxury tax. But then again, the Mets have proven luxury tax doesn't really matter to them anyway. They'll just pay whatever it is. But getting back to the Yankees, I think, obviously a little bit of a surprise going for Max Fried. They do have solid starting pitching. And that leads me to believe they're going to trade some of that starting pitching for a hitter, whether it's Cody Bellinger or Kyle Tucker or somebody like that. And also they'll be active in the free agent market. I mean, they could counter-strike the Mets and sign Pete Alonso. They have a hole at first base now that Anthony Rizzo is a free agent. And, there's a couple corner outfielders who could help them. Anthony Santander, Teoscar Hernandez. They're both still out on the market. So I would imagine the Yankees will be very active. Like you said, they signed Max Fried, and I don't think they're going to go away. I know they were disappointed Soto wasn't going to come back, but they'll find other ways to try to improve their team.
Without being too New York heavy for too much of this conversation, what's interesting to me is another one of the moves that the Mets made. And it involves a Yankee and a former Pirate, for that matter, Clay Holmes. They bring him in to apparently they're going to try and build him back up to be a starter. Claudio, I always think this is interesting. Not so much when we're taking a starter and putting them out to the bullpen, because I think that's more an adjustment of mindset maybe than an adjustment of actual physical ability. This is a guy, Holmes, who was one of the top prospects in the Pirate system years ago. Flamed out as a starter. They sent him to the bullpen, eventually ended up in New York, and he pitched some quality innings for them over the last few years near the back end of the bullpen. How difficult could it be, especially at this age, for Holmes to be built back up into a starting role?
I think anymore, it's different years ago when the starting pitcher was asked to go 7, 8 innings, maybe even 9. Now, if a guy like him can build his arm up and also his head, if he gives them, 4 innings as a starter, they might be happy. I mean, I was never a huge fan of his. I kind of said it jokingly during the World Series. If they don't use him, they'd be better off, but that's another story. But I do think it's a lot easier for the starter to go in the bullpen, Smoltz, Eckersley, people of that. Goose Gossage, Terry Forster years ago, those guys did it. I believe Fingers may have started off as a starter as well. But to go from bullpen to starter, maybe years ago it wouldn't have been it wouldn't have worked. But now when the expectations are less, and not only that, not the expectations so much, even the innings, but even years ago, and I'm sure our fans always saying, like John says, the old man screaming at the clouds. I like that line. That's me. But I do like the game years ago better, but that's another story. But I think it was expected more that, the quality start, if you remember several years ago, 5 innings, you give up 4 runs. Well, years ago, if you did that, you may have been let go. Now the expectations are less, giving up runs. As long as you can throw around 4 innings or so, 4 1/3, whatever, I think he can pull that off, I'm guessing.
Yeah, it's always interesting when you're trying to stretch an arm back out like that. As for the starting pitching market, John, interesting that Fried, at least in my opinion, interesting that Fried was the first one off the market and Corbin Burns is still out there. That may just be a matter, I guess, of trying to drive his value up. Maybe there's a few teams in on him. Plus, we've heard names bounced around in the trade market as well as far as starting pitching goes this offseason. What's the next step for clubs who are looking for some starting pitching this offseason?
Well, I think Corbin Burns is the big guy now, and his market's kind of been set. If Fried got over $200 million, then clearly Corbin Burns will get over $200 million too. And, the figure I kept hearing at winter meetings was 250, depending on, how many years, 7 years, 6 years, 8 years. I don't know. We'll see how that winds up. But, Max Fried's a very good pitcher. He's also been on the IL. Now, never any major problems here the last few years, but 7 times in the last 6 seasons. So you can't expect a full season from him, more like 26, 27 starts. Corbin Burns, on the other hand, goes to the post 32, 33 times a year. Won the Cy Young a couple of years ago. Milwaukee had a really good year with Baltimore this year after they traded for him right before spring training. So, I think he's the guy. And then you have Roki Sasaki, who is coming from Japan. An interesting situation. He's 24, so he's still subject to international amateur free agent bonus rules because of his age, under 25. So teams can sign him for a relatively small bonus compared to these other pitchers and pay him the minimum next year. And, he'd be just like a regular big leaguer and have to get 3 years of service time before he could go to arbitration. In a lot of ways, for a more economical way, and to know you have a guy at a cheaper salary longer, Sasaki might be a better option than Corbin Burns for a lot of teams, just for the fact that Burns is going to make the kind of money that only a handful of teams are going to be able to pay.
Yeah, how does that open the trade market then, John, as well? Because we've heard Dylan Cease's name get thrown out there, Framber Valdez in Houston, Jesus Luzardo in Miami, all names that have popped up over the last week during these winter meetings that you were at. May teams look at it and say, okay, I'm not willing to drop the 250 on Corbin Burns. I'll simply, I've got a wealth of prospects or whatever it may be. I'll look to make a deal and maybe get one good year out of that starting pitcher before I pivot next offseason to signing a long-term deal with someone.
Yeah, I think that's certainly a possibility, and I think Dylan Cease will generate a lot of interest if indeed the Padres are going to trade him. And I'm a little confused because I talked to A.J. Preller, the Padres GM, at the general managers meetings a little over a month ago, and he seemed to, the way he talked is they didn't really need to shed any salary. It wasn't like they were going to add a lot of salary this year, but I didn't have the feeling he felt like he needed to trade Dylan Cease or, another guy, not a pitcher, but a hitter, batting champion Luis Arraez, another guy whose name's been in a lot of trade rumors. So it'll be interesting to see there. And I think the Astros, if they're going to trade Kyle Tucker, and it seems like they're going to, I think finally we're going to see Houston for the first time in about a decade take a step back and maybe, if not rebuild, at least retool. And if they're going to do that, then it really makes sense to trade Framber Valdez because he is a in my mind, a very underrated pitcher. I believe he's one of the better pitchers in the game, and he doesn't get a whole lot of publicity about it. But, if they are going to take a step back, they'll certainly get a good prospect call for Kyle Tucker and also for Framber Valdez. So I think definitely Valdez is the guy I would keep an eye on. And I think somebody, if the Astros do trade him, will be getting a really quality pitcher.
Staying with starting pitching, Claudio, but not necessarily thinking about the financial aspect of it. Let's just talk about the construction of a rotation. Are you looking for guys that complement each other when you're looking to build out a rotation? Are you looking for, I got to have at least one lefty? No, I'd like to have two. Or when you look at construction and composition of a rotation now at the major league level, especially in this day and age where you're going to have more than 5 to get you through an entire season, how do you consider going out on the market and looking to pick up different starters?
Dude, I want a pitcher who wants the ball. I want a pitcher who does not want to come out of the game. That's number one for me. And that's something I'm going to be writing an article for Draft Nation here soon about building a team. For me, attitude, getting the right people on your team. Now, specifically the starting pitching staff, again, I want someone who wants the ball. And then I want stuff. I want someone who's not just going to throw the ball 150 miles an hour. I want a pitcher with command of 3-4 pitches, whatever. That's the type of pitcher that I want. And as far as lefty righty, you always want that mix. Of course you do. But again, the old real estate line, I've said it numerous times: good location, good location, good location. I say 3 most important things in business and life and sports is the right people, the right people, the right people. You want the right attitudes out there that are going to want the ball, that aren't going to quit, that when things are down, they keep fighting. That's who I want. That may not answer your question exactly, but if I was building a team, that's the first thing I look for. Yeah. Attitude. Then I look at command, control of his pitches, and I always say hitting is timing and balance. Pitching is messing that timing and balance up. Can this guy do that? Is he going to make these hitters look bad? Every time he walks to the mound with an attitude, okay, are those guys going to say, oh boy, we're in for a rough night today? That's what I look for in a pitcher. A classic example is just the way Nolan Ryan would walk to the mound, his attitude, the way he would look at you. And then he's known for that fastball, but then he'd have a hell of a curveball or a change, or a Tom Seaver who looked at pitching as like he was an artist. He was a pitcher. Skeens, he has a chance to be incredibly special. You have to have that attitude, and of course, you have to have the stuff. That's what I look.
Well, and I think that in and of itself, I think that does answer the question, because I think too many armchair managers get caught up. I've been guilty of this in the past, thinking, I got a fireball and righty at the top of the rotation. I got to have a southpaw to come in on the 3rd or 4th day, or I want this guy. This guy's stuff isn't top of the rotation. We get so caught up in all of that rather than some of the stuff that you just pointed out, the mental makeup of those guys taking the mound every 5 days. To pivot away from pitching, John, and back to what you may have heard down in Texas at the winter meetings, the next few names that may come off the board when we look at free agency. Christian Walker has been talked about a lot so far, presumably because the Yankees may have interest in him. Anthony Santander, who you mentioned already. We know that Alex Bregman is a free agent, not getting any younger, but he's available as well. Just when you look at the market as it's getting ready to really take off now that the Soto deal is done, where do you see some of these guys landing? Where do the best fits maybe make sense for some of these guys?
I kind of see Alex Bregman. We'll take him first. I see him in Boston. I just see him as a good fit there. They need a big bat. They need a third baseman, especially if they trade Christian Casas for a pitcher, which is definitely a possibility. The young left-handed hitting first baseman moved Devers over to first, Rafael Devers, and play Bregman at third. Bregman and Alex Cora were together in Houston. Cora was the coach there when Bregman played, and I think he's a good fit there. I think Christian Walker is a good fit with the Yankees. I think he's a good fit for a lot of teams. He'd be a good fit with the Pirates if they wanted to spend a little bit of money. He's hit between 25 and 35 homers each of the last 3 years. He's won the Gold Glove at the last 2 years in the National League at first base. He's been linked to the Yankees a lot too. He could be another possibility in Boston. But I think Christian Walker is going to be a good value at about $60 million for 3 years compared to Pete Alonso, who doesn't seem to be generating as much interest as you would think a guy like him would be generating. You don't hear too much. It's almost like he's a fallback plan in Seattle and a couple other places. But I don't think Pete Alonso is going to get the big $250, $300 million contract that Scott Boras' agent thinks. Alonso's a home run hitter, but he's a low average guy. He's not a good defensive first baseman. A lot of people don't think he'll age well, and it's going to be very interesting to see how it all turns out for him. And another guy out there is I think it's going to be interesting to see is Gleyber Torres, who's a second baseman. He's wants to stay at second base, and a lot of teams would like to have him as a third baseman or maybe move him to the outfield. And he may have no choice if he wants to sign a good contract but to switch positions. But, here's another guy who's fallen out of favor in New York, but still relatively young, only 28, and has had some really good years in the big leagues.
So John mentioned them. I'm going to pivot in this direction now, Claudio. The aforementioned Pittsburgh Pirates, who did make a deal. They did trade for a first baseman, a guy with more like 20 home run power than the 25 to 30 home run kind of power that Christian Walker or even more that Pete Alonso may have. We saw what this lineup lacked last year in Pittsburgh. They know they have the arms. It sounds like they even may be willing to deal an arm or two. That came up last week at the winter meetings in some of the reporting down there. But we know they need bats, and first base is a spot where they've got to get power. Corner outfield spot, they got to get power. It sounds like maybe they're going to work with Brian Reynolds to get him some plate appearances at first base as well. Just creating some greater flexibility. But the one thing I look at, as much as we love the glove at third base, there's still not a lot of power over there in Brian Hayes. And the rest of the infield, I don't want to say it's set. It's not written in stone, but you've got Kiner Falefa, you've got Triolo, you've got plenty of options around the infield, except at first base. Not enough power at third, which means you've got to make up for it in those corner outfield spots. Just as you're looking at the construction of the lineup right now, Claudio, what would be your priority looking at what's available out there?
My wife always buys those magic erasers. They erase everything. Okay, I think that's what the Pirates have to do. I like the pitching staff. Offensively, I don't see them doing anything more eye-popping than last year. It's going to be the same thing, in my opinion. Horwitz is all right. He's nice. Moving Brian Reynolds to first base is your typical Pirate move, in my opinion. Here's a guy who led the league in assists, I'm pretty sure, and you're going to move him to first base. Okay? Keep him in the outfield. Leave him alone. There's players. I know they're not going to spend a fortune, although this year, John and Chris, I don't know if you agree with this, but I always look at the baseball news. I've never seen so many players rumored to be coming to Pittsburgh than this year. It seems like all these guys are rumored to be coming to Pittsburgh, and none of them are going to come. Okay. And I've said this 1,000 times. If you're not going to go out and buy a new car, fix up the one you have. Okay. Brian Hayes is not a home run hitter. He was never going to be a home run hitter, but he can be a gap-to-gap guy. He can hit. I really believe he can be a 275 hitter with some extra base doubles and a few triples mixed in, and he'll hit 15 home runs maybe. They're asking some of these guys to do things that's not who they are. And I don't care what anybody says. I think a lot of these guys can be fixed. I know they can be. Hopefully, their new hitting coach can do it. They're not going to go spend a ton of money, and you don't have to spend a ton of money. Spend it properly. And I don't think they will. The thing with Cruz in the outfield, I know he could do it. He's physically gifted. Is he going to want to do it? Is he going to fade out? Is it going to affect his hitting? I don't know. Are they going to bring Henry Davis? I said this before. I don't think he's done. Okay, he might be, but he can be fixed. They probably won't fix him. Horowitz will hopefully hit about 20 some home runs. He might hit 250, 260. I don't know. I don't expect all that much unless they go out and get a half decent player and or fix up what they have, which I don't see it happening. So I made a lot of statements there. I think last year I think John and I said 77 wins. I know they're going to have Skeens at the beginning of the year and the pitching staff and so on and so forth. I see 75 to 77 wins again this year. I do not see them improving that much.
Yeah, my hope would be there's a natural lift from, like you said, Skeens being up the entire year and Jared Jones hopefully remaining healthy to get him closer to 80. But I agree, this still isn't a playoff team. John, what are they still considering doing? Because Spencer Horwitz, with all the other talent still out there and available on the market at first base, I don't think was as decent a hitter as he may be. It was not the move the Pirate fans were looking for. And then to also hear on the backside of that, hey, we're listening on Mitch Keller. I don't necessarily have a problem with trading Mitch Keller if you're going to get a bat back in return. I think we talked about before, the last time we talked, which was about a month ago as the season was wrapping up, we were looking ahead to the offseason and saying, hey, that might be a move you could make. But when part of the idea of doing it is to create additional financial flexibility, if that's the primary reason for trading Keller, I just sit there and shake my head and say, same old Pirates. They're right now projected to be bottom quarter of the league again in payroll. Keller is only, I want to say, 36th among starting pitchers. It is in salary for 2025. Are they actually, from what you've been able to glean down in Texas over the last week, and obviously you're close to the team on a regular basis, are they going to spend any more this year? Is the payroll going to increase? I don't expect it to get crazy, but is it at least going to get to a point where we can go, okay, they did try a little bit harder to go out and get some things that would add to the lineup, or again, if they trade pitching, add to the rotation?
I would been led to believe it's going to be minimal, and it's very disappointing. I thought they would spend some more money, especially you have already who's one of the top 10 pitchers in baseball, maybe even higher up on the list than that, and Paul Skeens, who you were paying basically the minimum salary to for the next couple of years. This is your time to spend some money in other places before you have to put a lot of it into Skeens and Jared Jones and go after it, but they don't seem to have that sense of urgency. And I know a lot of people in baseball who I talked to in Dallas, they like Horwitz okay. He has a 350 on base, 355 on base percentage, which is something they need more guys to be able to get on base. But they also need a bopper, and the place you usually have a bopper is at first base. And to me, he looks like a 20-homer guy. Mm-hmm. But a lot of people in baseball really don't understand what the Pirates are doing and why they have no urgency to try to win. And it leads me to wonder if maybe Bob Nutting's having financial problems. Maybe he is. He sold his ski resorts. Everyone knows the newspaper business is in the tank. Newspapers really, as sad as it is for somebody who made his living for many years in the newspaper business, it's just not the same anymore. And he's surely not making the profits with his newspapers that he used to. And it really does make you wonder if maybe he is having problems. And if he is, maybe he should sell the team to somebody that can afford to put a better product on the field. But it's very disappointing to find out. I thought they were going to increase their payroll somewhat this year, but basically they're going to have one of the lowest ones in the league again. And they're not going to be players on any significant free agents. And, when Ben Cherington said most of our moves will probably come after the holidays, you know what that means. It's after all the big guys have signed, then whatever's left over, players start to get desperate. it gets toward the end of January, spring training's a couple weeks away, you don't have a team, and all of a sudden you'll sign for $4 million a year instead of $8 million a year, just to make sure you have a job. And that sure seems like what the Pirates are going to do, the same old strategy again this year. And I don't know, maybe Matt Haig has holy water he can sprinkle over the hitters and get them all to be good big league hitters. But it's just very disappointing, very frustrating. And you'd be surprised how many people around the league just don't understand what's going on here in Pittsburgh. And really, they find it they're not even frustrated so much. They just find it sad. And for a franchise, one of the flagship franchises of the sport, and they feel bad for the fans. Like they said, the fans there deserve better than what they get. But that's what they're getting.
Yeah. Claudio, I've heard other people bring up this idea of the frustration that may mount for one of these young pitchers, Skeens in particular, maybe. John just made a good point. He's one of the top 10, maybe even more than that, maybe top 5 starting pitchers in Major League Baseball right now, going into the 2025 season. Knowing that your time to win championships is finite, especially as a starting pitcher. When you're part of an organization or a team that doesn't go out and appear to be doing all they can to build a squad around you, how frustrating can that be for a young guy, knowing that, yeah, I believe in myself and I do believe in some of these teammates that are around me, but it feels like the organization may not be as invested in this as even we are as players.
You almost tend to go into business for yourself. You say, you know what, we're not getting anywhere. I'm going to do my thing, and whatever happens, happens. I'm going to go out and show my wares. Again, Steve Carlton in 72, I believe, with the St. Louis Cardinals, he won 27 games for an awful team. And the rest is history after that season for him. He went to Philadelphia. I think a guy like Skeens or a Jones, I don't think they would say, well, you know what? I'm not going to lay it all on the line for a team that's only going to win 60, 70 games. They're not laying it on the line. I'm not going to either, because then that would show a bad attitude on their part.
Right.
And then they may not put up the numbers, and they might just be some other pitcher, or just another guy. So I don't think they would ever do that. I think they're going to go into business for themselves, basically saying, we're not going to win. I'm going to go out there and think of myself and do my thing and let the chips fall where they may. But I don't think, again, that's where attitude, as I told you earlier, comes in. Do you want a guy who's going to quit? And there's been athletes who, I forgot the guy's name. He said, what did he call it? George, not Bell. What was the guy's name, John, who said Operation Shutdown?
Oh, Derek Bell.
Yeah. You don't want that kind of guy. And I don't think anybody in the Pirates pitching staff, or on the team for that matter, I would hope, isn't like that. But everybody does their part, and the ownership and the GM and the front office. Look, the Pirate fans, if you just do okay, they're going to bust that place open. They're going to want to. I know the Pirate fans; they deserve more than they're getting, and I don't think that the National League, that this division, nobody's going to run away with it. Okay, they could possibly do something. If Haig has some holy water, if the pitching, instead of going to the bullpen when it's not time to go to the bullpen, just don't go to the bullpen because you want to go to the bullpen. Keep the starting pitchers in. Have a little bit of a different philosophy. Maybe be like my team at Carnegie Mellon. We don't have a lot of power. We don't have a lot of speed. What's our personality then? We're just going to scratch and claw. Just scratch and claw. We're going to fight. We're going to be a pain every time you play us. And the Pirates have to have a personality. The Bash Brothers or the We Are Family. Everybody had, the Braves. You knew they were loaded with pitching. What is the Pirates' personality this year? I don't know what it is. I would say you're not going to have a big power hitting team. You do have some pitching and defense, and scratch and claw. Steal some bases, hit and run, bunt. Do something. Be a pain to play. Know that when you're playing the Pirates, you're in for a battle. You might win, but it's like some boxers. Jerry Quarry, John will remember. He would lose his share of fights, but you knew damn well you were in a fight after you got done with Jerry Quarry. Be that. What is your personality? If they do that attitude, and it starts at the top. If they do that, I don't think that division is that great that, you can say this team's going to win it or that team's going to win it. Who knows? And with the wild card, they could make some noise. I don't think they will, but I think that's a possibility.
Yeah, I would hope the personality is that of young power arms like Skeens and Jones, and definitely some guys who are going to come up later in the year as well. Bubba Chandler has been talked about a lot. So we'll see. You would like to see some supplement in the lineup as well. We'll see if they do anything this offseason. Got to thank John Perrotto, Pittsburgh Baseball Now and Baseball Digest. Carnegie Mellon head coach, also the Global Scouting Bureau, Claudio Reilsono. I'm Chris Mack. Thank you both, gentlemen, for going on the clock here on the latest episode of Real Baseball Talk on Draft Nation. And, of course, you can get more from both of these gentlemen online right now. A ton of stuff from John from the winter meetings, and as Claudio mentioned, more off-season team-building articles as well at draftnation.com. Go sign up for your free membership right now.